Absolutely. So, right, guys, good morning to everybody who is with us so far. I am joined by the wonderful Dan, Sham, and Kath this morning to discuss GenAI and unlocking its capability for your contact center and CX operations. The reason we're doing this is because in my space, I'm hearing a lot of noise of people wanting to hire and coming to me for people to hire who have experience in deploying and utilizing GenAI solutions in contact center, and it's not hugely widespread actually at the moment in and amongst manager and head of level. So hopefully this session gives a bit of an insight into the background of what you can do, and if you've not started on this journey yet, a bit of an idea of how to get going actually on that particular side. So shall we run through a round of introductions, and we'll start with you if we can, Dan, because you're the first on my screen.
Okie dokie. Yeah, Dan Eddy, Customer Services Director at Simply Health and Demplan. You can see my branded T-shirt here, polo shirt, who I'm representing today. I've been at Simply Health for 3 years and came to do a job of kind of a bit of a transformation or analog to digital transformation, which includes the use of AI. And I'll come on to explain why we're using AI in a short while.
Perfect. And Sham, you're next on my screen, but you're on mute.
Hey, I was just trying to have a strong mute game. It always helps on these sort of online conferences. I'm Sham, sort of 20 odd years in the customer experience game, triple threat, if you will, with Selfridges, Matches Fashion, and Net-a-Porter, amongst other brands. I'm now working for Centisum as Director of Partnerships. So I've gone from implementing AI at one brand to now spreading the love and being able to work with many brands. Looking forward to talking more about AI today.
Fab. And Kath?
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Catherine Simons-Porter. I am the Sales VP for Local Measure, which is a global Amazon Connect partner. I've been selling contact center now for about 25 years. In 2015, I became a certified customer experience practitioner, and more recently, my postgrad in emotional intelligence and the role of next generation agents and AI and emotional intelligence. So I'm really pleased to be here today, and it's great to have the conversation.
Perfect. And we've set up a structure of a couple of key topics that we're going to go through, but if you've got any questions along the way, just pop them in the comments section and we'll address them as soon as we can, if not at the end of the session. And if any questions occur to you following on from that, please reach out and I will ask one of my experts here to help me out, because GenAI in contact center, not the expert here. So we thought we'd start by exploring the difference actually, because AI comes into a huge umbrella. What is GenAI versus AI? So Kath, I think this was something that you were keen to cover off at the start.
I think, there's a lot of noise at the moment around AI, generative AI. And it's a bit like when organizations started to shift their contact centers to cloud. Was it a private cloud? Was it public cloud? Is it hosted cloud? It's a lot of misunderstandings. There's a lot of education that needs to be done out there. And artificial intelligence, AI is nothing new. The real boffins out there would argue it's been around for 15, 20 years in some sort of form. Certainly being used in a contact center setting, it has been around for a number of years. I have worked with vendors that have been providing, for instance, agents assistance. We're going to talk a lot about agents assistance today. From an AI perspective, that's been around for a number of years. We're now almost at 3 years since ChatGPT changed our worlds, whether it's professionally or whether it's personally. But certainly these use cases in customer care and within contact center to help leaders, contact centers, agents, customers, so many different stakeholders and actors here to really understand intent, to sharpen up and to get to outcomes far quicker. And really being able to use natural language understanding, as I say, to understand the intent, to be able to resolve these issues quicker, or to service or to sell to the consumer far quicker than before. So yeah, that's my 2 pence for now.
Anything to add, gents? Nope. Oh, well, perfect. And that leads us nicely on to you, Dan, from what you said from the beginning. So what was to talk about some business cases and use cases and why you went on the transformation program that you did with Simply Health?
Yeah, sure. First of all, what Cass said there, I think really succinctly summarises up how the landscape looks and feels at the moment, and where AI has been used and is being used and is being thought about. So not much to add to what Cass said there. So look, I suppose with that being said, there's always a case of, well, why are you wanting to use AI as part of your transformational journey or part of a journey to better serve a customer or a patient? For us at Simply Health, it's actually helping us to realize our purpose as an organization. So that's the real reason why we're in healthcare, and currently the NHS is broken, right? So there are 8 million people who are queuing for more than 4 weeks just to get a simple GP appointment, or indeed a dental appointment, or any kind of simple healthcare requirement. Really is very, very challenging in this current time. You've also got 27 million employees out there who haven't got any kind of healthcare product, right, or plan. So there's a need for healthcare access, affordable healthcare access, and employers today are not providing their employees, and therefore there is a kind of massive 2 billion impact on the economy for absenteeism, through whether that be mental health provision or musculoskeletal or whatever it might be, right? So there is a problem, and we want to help and assist the NHS to solve that problem, and therefore our purpose is to improve access to healthcare for all in the UK. And we serve 2.6 million patients and customers today through our health plan and dental plan business, but we want to be able to serve millions more, 10 million over the coming years, right? Because people want affordable access to healthcare. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we need to take a look at ourselves as an organisation. Are we fit to scale? Are we fit to grow and add millions more customers into our domain? And the honest answer is, well, 2 or 3 years ago we weren't fit to grow, and we want to fulfil our purpose. So for us, the reason we're using AI is to complement the human expertise we have in our business to better be able to scale. And what I mean by that specifically is, how can we become more productive in day? So back in 2023, where we were able to serve circa 30 customers today through a kind of an analog phone channel, well, today in 2024, we can serve 45, 50 customers in a day through multiple channels, and to be able to use AI to help serve some of those simple queries at the front end, and indeed through other channels that we'll operate, which I'll come on to explain. And in future, next year, our ambition is to get into the kind of 60 and 70 customers in a day, 24/7, using AI to help resolve some of those simple, complex queries, and leave the human expertise to add the real value and deal with the complex query, right? So there's a real reason to why we're bringing AI into our landscape, and why we're using generative AI to help through our email channel at the moment, and I'll come on to explain a bit more about how we've done that. And also using conversational AI at the front end, which is resolving 40% of all of our contact that comes into our organization. So the really easy stuff, the document generation stuff and easy answer, that conversational AI is providing real value. And why is it providing value? Because it comes back to what we're trying to achieve through this balance, which is delivering on our purpose.
I'm just going to pick up on actually something that Dan mentioned there. Sometimes it's the most obvious things that actually make one of the biggest impacts in life. We've just launched multilingual dynamic language translation. If you think about it in the context of the NHS or healthcare in general, or citizen services within public sector, not just from a consumer, self-service perspective, but being able to give the public, for the first time ever, the choice to be able to correspond and communicate with the service provider in a language of their choice. That alone is really groundbreaking. And generative AI actually really allows vendors, trying to be impartial here, of course, tries to allow vendors to be able to quickly test a number of languages. We've, a local measure, been able to test in over 100 languages really, really quickly. And now we can actually take this to market in the huge, diverse culture that we now live in the UK, we can actually help citizens, patients, to be able to, again, to resolve their queries. And as we know, now when you fall into an assisted channel, whether it's voice or whether it's live chat, it tends to be the highly complex or highly emotional type interactions. So by helping consumers, patients, and citizens to be able to correspond in their chosen choice is phenomenal.
Absolutely. And I'd like to pick up on something, obviously, from the people element, shock, is just if you're having your agent, if you're using GenAI, AI to service your less complex queries, the high volume, and therefore you have got your employees answering these more challenging query after challenging inquiry, more emotively driven. How do you make sure that you're looking after the well-being of your agents, I guess, when they're constantly on complex query after complex query?
It's a really good question. I think all of us probably taught to it, but how I handled that at Selfridges was to involve the agent population in the implementation. So as part of the project, bringing them in, full comms about what we were doing, why we were doing it, and talking about it as augmentation rather than replacement, and being able to get them involved, get them testing our use cases that we were implementing so that they had skin in the game. And very quickly we got to that conversation. The conversation appeared that said, okay, I don't really want to do Wizmos and returns anymore. I love that AI is going to come in and automate that. But those Wizmos and returns, they help my handling time. They bring down my handle time. It drives up my productivity. Suddenly, I'm going to go from doing 50, 60 contacts down to 30, 40 contacts. But it's the same amount of time because they're more complex. So actually, I'm going to have a harder job to do going forwards. And so our role then was to sit down actually with the same team and do the thinking. And it sounds like the most obvious bit in the world, but sometimes to just stop and say, where do we want to play as a team? Now that we're automating some of these things, we have some time. And what do we want to do with that time? And so our brand like Selfridges, giving style advice, helping dress people for parties, giving them, makeup information, helping them differentiate between a particular type of handbag, and having that consultation, that type of interesting discussion rather than, hey, I'd like to return this item, can I have a refund? It helped to sort of give them some buy-in, allow them to be augmented and not have to deal with returns and Wizmos. And so, the way we dealt with it was by doing the thinking with the team, not for the team.
And so changing a bit of the job role as well, adding things that they'd be more interested in. And obviously that's the nice side of the fashion retail side, that they can help dress people. How have you addressed that in the health space, Dan?
Well, just before I sort of answer that question, just to compliment Sham there, because, what is really clear is kind of why are you wanting to use AI? And there's that piece, but there's also the kind of contact center strategy, right? What is the strategy that you're trying to deliver on, right? And that might be a 3 or a 5 year strategy that you've outlined. And it's the transparency of that to your teams, to the people who are doing the work, that's really key. And then involve them, as Sham says, in the how you do that and how you deploy it. And a key part of that is kind of business readiness, right? How do you ready the implementation of change, and AI is part of that change, but also recognizing within that strategy is actually if that job becomes more complex. And in our world, actually, what we've said is our contact strategy will involve multi-skilling as well as AI, away the easy stuff. Now that actually makes the job, to Sham's point, more complex actually, and there is absolutely a need for us to pay more money to our frontline staff because of the value they're now giving to our patients and customers. Our productivity kick up is through the fact that they've been able to multi-skill, not just take phone calls, but actually do claims administration, whatever the customers or patients want from us, the agent is multi-skilled and adds more value, right, through the channels, live chat, WhatsApp, whatever channel the customer or patient chooses. And therefore, the complement of AI and the human expertise is huge value to the customer in terms of service levels, in terms of swiftness of resolution, frictionless experiences. And therefore, you've got to recognise that value, and you've got to continue to work with the agents to explore the possibilities of and opportunities within the journeys, the customer journeys and patient journeys that you have. So it's really important, the transparency and what it means for your teams. One of the couple of things that we did, one was actually when we set out this analog to digital strategy, this kind of 5-year plan was actually at the start of that, was do a will and a skill assessment of our teams. What do I mean by that? Well, what's the digital skill self-assessment? How digitally ready am I as an agent to look forward to different channels and having AI working with me, assisting me and alongside me? And what's my will in that? Because if I've been working at Simply Health for 20 years and I've been just doing claims handling, I might not want to, or I might not want to go on that journey with you. But the transparency of us saying, well, that's where we're going, and we're not going to deviate from that, means that there is a decision point to be had, but it's an amicable one because of the transparency. The other thing was in that kind of change element and that business readiness of when change is coming. It is something that we evoked is this kind of speed to happiness from an agent perspective. So whenever there's a change, a new thing that comes in, whether that's through conversational AI or AI helping in the email channels or indeed any kind of change, we measure the speed to happiness. How well have we done in terms of readying the workforce, in terms of training, in terms of communication, in terms of were you able to play before you went live? What was the go live like? What was it a week or two later? How has it landed for you? That kind of speed to happiness score out of 10 is something we place real value on, because that gives us great feedback into the process of how we can continue to make better. Back to Sham's point, real involvement in how you can ready your workforce to do that more value-adding work for your patients and customers.
Definitely. And we've had a question in, Dan. I'd imagine mostly for you, but if you've got any experience on this side, but would be keen on shedding some light on the compliance perspective of integrating AI for customer and patient interaction specifically. So actually that can be open to any of you, really.
I'll have a first stab. I'll try and be brief as well, so that I'm not hogging the time. So look, it depends again why you're wanting to use it. What's the problem? What's the question you're trying to answer? For us, it's been about the complement of AI and human expertise. And within the email channel, we're using a certain provider, and we have built the grounding of frequently asked questions. We've put in previously sent emails that answered those frequently asked questions and attached knowledge articles to that clean knowledge environment. And then the GPT that Kath referred to, a version of GPT, is able to just look at that knowledge environment and only the knowledge that we've put in there. And therefore, it's able to then summarize and provide an answer through emails. Now, we started really small, with one FAQ, how do I change dentist? And gave the grounding of 500 previously sent emails to just answer that one question, attach the knowledge articles. And then it was able to pop up an answer in 3 seconds, right? Usually to create an email, it takes us between 10 and 12 minutes. It now takes about 1 minute because there's a human in the loop who checks that email that GPT has provided, in this case, Einstein GPT, and then checks and then presses send. So they're accountable. A human is still accountable, human in control, human at the wheel, if you like, for sending. But the time saved of 1 minute to 12.5 is huge. Now, we've extrapolated that across 5 business areas at the moment. We're sending 1,200 emails using generative AI per week at the moment, and the saving is hundreds of hours, right? And that enables our humans, again, to use their expertise in other value-adding areas, more complex areas. And so the swiftness of our response times on emails has really been improved. And the emails are frustrating if you don't get a quick answer right within 24 hours, 48 hours,
right? I would agree with Dan, actually, that email is a great little low-hanging fruit to actually be able to prove that generative AI. Would you believe, I was actually looking at a Contact Babel report from this year, so it is current, in that 92% of organizations are still really handling it in a manual process. And on average, emails are still taking a day, if not longer, to be resolved. So email optimization is perfect. And also when you look at the user ages of using email, maybe the initial response is not the younger generation. Well, in fact, it is. And I certainly know that my 19-year-old autistic stepson would much rather use a digital channel and including email rather than picking up the phone if there's a problem. But just going kind of back to the agent tools, we talk about the effortless experience for consumers, and this really should absolutely apply for agents. We know two things, actually, that there are more graduates in working in contact centers than ever before, but also that there are more neurodiverse agents than ever before. So how can we equip our agents to give them the right tools in order to be able to resolve that query quickly? Because at the end of the day, that's all the customer actually still wants. That number one, North Star has not gone away. We know again that the interactions, the average handle time generally has gone up because these are the complex, these are the highly emotional sort of interactions. So the average handle time is longer, but by able to use generative AI tools in the context of an agent desktop, whether it's offering the agent real-time guidance through Einstein or other generative AI enablement, or whether it's populating all of the fields so that the agent doesn't need to do any of the heavy lifting, so that the agent only is looking at one screen and not flipping between all these multitudes of screens, whether it's speaking to a customer, like we've talked about, in their own native language, so you don't have that language barrier, or whether it's perhaps, I could be really good at writing a chat message in a live chat scenario, but I'm not very good at elongating that into an email. So being able to use generative AI tools to either elongate a message and embellish it, but always having that human in the loop, I think that's going to be around for a little bit longer yet until we're really sure about that safeguarding and the guardrails that sit around generative AI. But all of these are different tools that the agent can have in their desktop in order to better serve the customer.
Definitely. And I think something that comes up a lot in conversations that I have with people that have not yet started on this journey is actually, how do I start, especially within an organization that's quite resistant to digital change, and therefore AI, Gen AI seems like this big scary thing. And I know you, Sham, have had experience of working within more traditional environments that may have been a bit more resistant to the digital side. So how did you approach that in terms of getting that business case over the line for the use of Gen AI and different digital channels?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I see it a lot now as well, working with all sort of different types of organizations and that readiness to implement AI and any and all technologies, actually. Just bringing something in, it's a big investment. And so often helping people demystify it a little bit. For me, it's about storytelling, the art of storytelling, and I guess using less buzzwords. And you would think that AI is a buzzword, but I've seen research recently that suggests that it puts people off. And so I think less around the buzzwords, the technical features, and more around the use cases. What problems will whatever tech solve? And so are you trying to augment the customer care team? Are you trying to automate and answer more emails, for example? So you're trying to do more with less, and then being able to build out the relevant business case. The SaaS industry has done really well in helping build business cases. And so if you are a customer care person in a contact center and you'd like to implement AI or other tech, it's thinking about which use cases and problems you want to solve. We've spent a little bit of time talking about automation, so maybe I could give you a slightly different example. So, we are known, especially in the contact center world, for hoarding data. We've been collecting it forever, since the beginning of time, whether that was pen and paper, making little tally sheets on how many calls somebody did in a day. That's how old I am, by the way. We used to write down how many calls we used to make, versus now all these tools that can sort of tell you that. So we've been collecting this data, collecting it, and we've been using it, actually, I would say, over the last 10 years. Contact center managers have taken this information, used pivot tables, sat down and read hundreds, if not thousands, of tickets and tried to figure out what that data is saying, to then go and drive this change, to gain this investment, to bring in this technology and say, our data is telling us X, we need to do Y with Z supplier because they solve whatever problem. So we're sort of spending time. The beauty in AI, and I can't think of a replacement word for that, so buzzword, apologies, guilty, is that you can use AI language models to crunch this data. And the beauty, the next level, that if you're taking it, a step further, is you can crunch unstructured data. So this is all that information that sits inside a text field that somebody's just typed some notes in, left it there, hardly ever gets pulled out unless it's in an Excel spreadsheet somewhere. These language models can bring this information all together, apply some tagging to it, and then suddenly pull out this insight and do it in seconds. You almost feel a little bit hard done by if you're in my generation of reading thousands of tickets, where now there's solutions out there where people click a button and in 60 seconds they get to the same outcome. And so, this is just, I guess, a part of life and times where things get easier and better and faster, thinking back, to the abacus, to the calculator, to whatever came after that. So these things are not there to sort of replace jobs, but these use cases, I have to just tie this off because I've gone off on a ramble slightly, but it's using that data that we've been hoarding for years to tell the right story to unlock the use case. I probably should have just started with that, Kerry.
Well, do you know what? I think it's always interesting because it's the same thing as when we were at school and you weren't allowed to use calculators for your maths because they're like, you're not always going to have a calculator in your pocket. And we now know that that is not true. With our smartphones and whatnot. So I think to stay to a bit of time, I think one of the big things that you've already mentioned, Dan, is one of the vendor partners that you used in order to go on to this particular journey. And one of the things that we've talked about in terms of a topic in this session is about vendor selection and the questions that you need to ask up front in order to secure the right vendor partner. So what was your process when going through the different vendors that you could have taken on this journey with you?
Sure. If you'll allow me, I'll come on to that in 20 seconds. Just coming back to the question that was in the chat but didn't really answer around compliance, right? So with compliance, risk, data protection, data usage, etc., you've got to have those people, if you like, those departments in the room with you when you're looking at used cases. Don't go off on the tangent on your own and start to try and do something and then bring the business case, right? Have them in the room and help them build the business case with you. So whether that's in our organization, we created an AI forum and we wrote an AI policy together and brought language model policies and everything else together to form an AI policy that was fit for purpose and fit for our forum. So that kind of governance around how you introduce AI and why you're introducing the ethical responsibilities that sat around that for your organization. So just coming back to that compliance element, Kerry, really important. So on the kind of vendor selection, look, wow, and I'm sure Sham and Kath will say the same, right? There are loads of suppliers, vendors out there at the moment, right? But it's a really healthy market space. You just got to be really, again, back to that use case. Why right, are you wanting to use AI and where is the problem? Are you trying to use conversational AI? For us, when we bought conversational AI in, it was because we were having a problem in getting to some of the calls that were coming in. So the length of wait time was unacceptable. We needed some help without adding loads of manual cost into that. So that was the first if you like, iteration of us using AI. And the vendor selection wasn't as big 2 years ago as it is now in that conversational AI marketplace. But happy to share that we went with Poly AI, right? And again, just sharing that out with transparency. Poly AI work in the US and in the UK now. They've been incredibly successful. They work with the likes of FedEx in the US, who have 58 million calls a year, right? And Poly's helping resolve 40 to 50% of 58 million calls that come into FedEx every year. So it's a very powerful tool. And for us, it's handling, as I said, handling all of the calls that come in, every single call. And it's resolving 30, 40% of calls, depending on the contact center. We've got 3 contact centers, but it handles all of the calls that come in. Now, the other great thing, and just to pull on what Kath said earlier, is actually it's now integrated with our CRM system. So it is actually identifying and verifying the customer as well. So it's taking 40 seconds off every single phone call that we have. So the vendor selection is really important, because if you've got your CRM already in place, how does it integrate? How can you pull the data, to Sham's point, to really help and assist why you are using it in the first place? So that extra 40 seconds off several tens of thousands of calls a week or month, adds up again to help us deliver on the purpose of being able to scale as a business, right? So vendor selection, really important. Make sure you can leverage it at the back end. There's loads of, again, AI helping to case summarize the interaction that you've just had, to give you, instead of having to tap notes in that take 2 or 3 minutes, they can summarize that in seconds. You can do the check as a human and press send into the note system, and that's all done. So at the top end and the back end, vendor selection, incredibly important, again, depending on what it is you're trying to achieve with it. In the AI space, again, depending on how your thinking is evolved here. For us, when we were thinking about omni-channel, which was a kind of analog to digital journey, it was about, well, I have to not think about the next 2 or 3 years. Actually, I have to think about the next 5. Why would I think about the next 5? Because actually a normal contact center solution, actually, I think will reach a ceiling in, if we're thinking back in 2023, by 2024, 25, might reach a ceiling of opportunity. So what am I really?
Did we lose Dan?
Are you still there? Can you hear me?
Back.
Yeah, sorry. You've got to be thinking of backing the right horse, if you like. If you're thinking AI, you're thinking how it's going to deliver on your business strategy, on your purpose. Then your Microsoft, your Metas, your Amazons, your Salesforces, they're going to be front of the evolvement and evolution of how AI is used in contact centers and in operational businesses. So again, depending on why you are thinking of using AI or automation, you've got to be backing a vendor that is going to be at the forefront of how this thing evolves, because in 3-4 years' time, the landscape is going to be incredibly different to what it is today. And you don't want to be reaching a ceiling of opportunity by going in with a normal contact center solution, right? And only reaching certain levels of opportunity if your purpose is greater than that. Hopefully that makes sense.
Definitely. And obviously, Kath and Sham, you're now sat on the vendor side of things. So what would you suggest would be the important and prudent questions to ask up front, standing on part of Dan's point that you've got a certain CRM that it needs to integrate with? Yeah. Question up front, surely. Can you integrate with this CRM?
And show me, I mean, actually seeing it, whether you want to badge that as a hackathon or a bake-off, against the shortlist when you get a bit further down the track, is going to be far more impactful and productive than looking at data on an Excel spreadsheet that you've asked a bunch of vendors to fill, which, to be quite honest, in my opinion, is kind of lazy procurement these days. Let's all be a little bit more innovative. I still firmly believe that the greatest barrier to excellent customer service is actually the organization themselves, and these invisible barriers that sit around each line of business. In my career, I've certainly seen a lot of changes in terms of there are far more stakeholders that now are involved or should be involved in that process, whether they are sitting within the InfoSec team, within governance. They're really looking at GDPR, for instance. So to Dan's point, if you're speaking to an organization such as Amazon or Google or Microsoft, the beauty of these guys is that all of the data stays within the customer's infrastructure. So it means that the vendor isn't extracting anything. So that tick in the box. So your InfoSec team are like satisfied and happy. Okay. I would love to see HR being included in some of these discussions. Agents are, they have some of the hardest roles and jobs and days in comparison to any other roles within the organization. Huge attrition, really expensive. Why aren't we speaking to the HR teams, invite them? And then also doing good old-fashioned sitting with the contact center, looking at the behavior of the agents. Often an agent will behave in a way throughout the interaction of a call or a chat or whatever the activity is that they're performing, but they won't be aware of what they're doing. And those experts can go in there and then make these recommendations. So I think that who do we invite to the party, if you like, is across roles, top down, diagonal. And as you get further along, I would always say to the customer, take a look at it, prove it, make them go through that. And if you are doing any sort of a pilot, do it well. It's really important to baseline what that current state is today, not just in terms of what is the technology that sits in situ today, but how much does it cost? How much is our cost to serve across all of the different channels? And then when you're going through your minimal viable product one or your pilot, then you can really look retrospectively and really pull together a really compelling benefits realization.
Perfect. I just want to say, Abby, I am not ignoring your question. We'll come to it. But actually, one of the big questions there is, as Dan said, 3 years ago, there weren't as many vendors, and it feels like lots more vendors are popping up all over the place. And, when you go to any of these forums and things, there are a lot of tech vendors. How do you cut through the noise in the initial? I know you said, Kath, not to go after everybody to have all of these big Excel documents, but how do you cut through the volume in the first place?
Well, look, it's kind of what's the problem? Well, what is it you're trying to do, right? If you're going to bring in an omni-channel solution because you want more channels to give your customers more choice, or have you got a specific problem, or is it a purpose-driven, strategic-driven? So there's that question to first ask, Kerry, and then you might have a used case where, to Kath's point, where you have a particular problem and you need to address that quickly. So that might mean you look in a specific part of the market to try and solve that position, but already looking at the tech stack that you've got. And I think Sham said this earlier, right? We can all be guilty of sort of saying, that's the solution, that's what I want, rather than asking what is the problem and how do we solve the problem, right? That's the first question. So that would be my guidance is, don't jump in with the obvious solution, ask the question, talk to your team, tech teams and product teams, etc., to try and answer it first. And then what are you going to market for then? Because there are hundreds of vendors now in different parts of the market space for contact center.
Yeah, that's lines directly with my experience when I was out shopping. Anyone and everyone, and imagine I was at Selfridges, right? So the world and its mother wanted to work with us, right? And they all said, we could build it for you, we could do that for you. Yes, yes, yes. The answer was always yes. Can you do this? Yes. Have you done it before? Not yet. And so there is this bit around, ask them to show you, which Kath said. How do you do that? Case studies, ask to speak to reference accounts. Who else is that supplier working with? Are they in a similar industry category to you and your brand and business? So could you get a case study? Could you have a conversation? And the word integration keeps popping up, but it's quite an important one. There's a lot of technical debt out there. So to break that down, people have systems that span 10 years, early technologies mixed with late technologies, on-premise with cloud, all these messaging layers and APIs in the middle, trying to create these very, very complex maps and organizations, when in the end, you're perhaps an e-commerce brand selling a product or a service. So in order not to just make that worse and keep building on top of it, if you are married to a particular piece of technology, perhaps your CRM or your ticketing system, and you're in there for a while with a 2-year, 3-year, 5-year contract, having a look at complementary products would very quickly help you narrow down the industry. So instead of looking at 100, it will narrow your scope down to, say, less than 10. And then at that stage, remember what I said earlier, go back to the use case. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And then who does that really well? Everybody does a little bit of everything, but there's a few that specialize. And if you have the foresight like Dan does to think forwards 3 years, 5 years, knowing that you're not just looking for quick fixes today, but you're headed in a certain direction. And the hint here is North Star, use your business North Star direction. Then you can think about, do I need just a tech for today? Or do I want a partner that's going to grow with me as I continue? And as they scale, as that partner introduces new technology, I get to test those features because I'm already working with them. They understand my landscape and they understand my objectives and my North Star, so they can grow with us. And so I like the idea of partnerships within tech vendors and not just this B2B sales angle. It's not a one and done. It's a partnership where you can grow.
Mm-hmm. I think also customers would be wise to ask vendors for evidence of their time to value. So, low code, no code, generative AI technology has created this kind of illusion that it's really easy now to build some of these use cases. And you don't perhaps need a partner even, you could just buy it directly from the vendor and off you go. The reality isn't as such. And, I don't want to take anything from the IT team. I think a couple of years ago, maybe the IT, those in the IT team were scared for their jobs. Actually, this technology is an enabler for them because it can help them to work more strategically with the business. And so really done well, certainly with ready to go pre-configured out of the box solutions, which you're going to get from vendor or vendor partners that have done this before, so that they can kind of cookie cutter and deliver it across different sectors really easily. But rather than it taking upwards of 9 months to 12 months to get a use case, which is ridiculously painful, especially when consumer behavior is so fickle, that might not be needed anymore. You can actually start to realize these outcomes within weeks.
Yeah, I think that's it, right? Because when we talk about Sham's word here, right, the North Star for us, as I mentioned right at the beginning, it's all about our purpose, right, and being able to scale up our organisation to serve millions more customers, because the NHS is fundamentally broken and it's not going to be fixed anytime soon, right? So there's a real why over the next 3 to 5 years of what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to be fit for purpose, which means commercially our cost to serve and our operational base needs to be fit for purpose, right, to enable that scaling to happen. We need to be more productive, which is what I explained. But also once you start to face into those use cases and start to get the value, the expertise that you've got can really start to look more at root cause, because that is has always been, why are people contacting us, why are people picking the phone up or asking us questions through live chat, etc., in the first place. They've got access digitally to it, or they've got a booklet or whatever they've got. Why are they ringing us? So cutting into that root cause and allowing that expertise to spend more time analysing it and reviewing it, because you've got help doing the easy stuff. You do have more time, is what we found anyway, right? Because we've been, I think, sensible in the way we've deployed and enabled more resource to come out of the front line that really knows how to serve the customer, but come into that digital environment and start to analyze why customers are contacting us in the first place. And for us, our moment of truth is all about claims, right? Claiming. When I go to the optician or the dentist, I need to put my claim in, and I want the 50 quid back in my pocket as quickly as I possibly can, because it's tough for everybody at the moment. Prices are up for everything, so I want that £50 back in my pocket. So when we start to look at our own claims experience, it wasn't really good enough, right? We were perhaps taking 4 or 5 days to get money back into the customer's pocket. Now, today we have used AI and automation to make the process slicker. We've used our own claims rules engine to make that process faster and risk accept. Again, we're having everybody in the room, making sure we're clear on why we're doing it, to make the customer experience more frictionless and easy so they get the money back in the pocket. And for us, that's reduced the process time within, we now process all claims within 1 day. The customers are getting money back in the pocket within 48 hours. Our CSAT's gone through the roof, right? Positively, 99% satisfaction for online claiming. And of course, the contact that we were seeing in 2023 compared to 24 were 160,000 contacts less this year than we were last year. We had a complaints pipeline of 600 complaints at the beginning of 2023. We now have only 24 complaints in my pipeline today. As I sit here today, serving 2.6 million customers, we only have 24 complaints. Just breathe that in for a minute, because I know for many of you that'll be like, whoa. And that's our best stat. And that's been enabled by repositioning some of our frontline team into the analysis and root cause space, and really being able to go hard at what is the real problem for customers, or what is the issue for them, and resolving it and making it better. I'm not being complacent about sitting still on it, continue to review it and improving it.
You're on mute, Kerry.
Still on mute, I think.
Kerry, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Kerry. Maybe cycle the mic on and off a couple of times.
It's still nothing. While Kerry sorts that out, I will actually just say that what Dan said, I advocate, because I'm actually a happy customer of Simply Health. And when I processed my claim, I got it within a week, I think. And it was so simple on the app. So, that isn't a planted, found over here, but I absolutely mean it. Happy customer.
Good to hear.
Let's see if this works. Anything?
It works.
Excellent. Woohoo, tech. But hard to believe, but we're down to the last sort of 15 minutes. So lessons learned then, because I guess the theme through this is start with your use case, build everything around that, other than not, hey, we need to start using this lest we fall behind the curve, really, and then start building that around it. So start from the use case. So anything that you have learned through the implementation that actually best practice, if you were to start the journey again, what would you do differently, if anything? And Dan, because you've done this most recently, I guess, or Sham, because you did it with the Selfridges, whichever one wants to go first.
I'll pick up on what Sham said earlier, and then he can build on it if you like, which is, use your people early, right? We created a kind of business readiness team that's made up of the people that were doing the job, right? Because they know the job better, and they're the best ones to do some of that analysis. Don't be led. This is going to sound really weird, perhaps. Don't be led by tech. Don't let tech lead the agenda. This is, you know your customers better than anybody else, and the points of pain and where you need to solve problems for them. And your people know that better than anybody else. So let them in, let them do the work, let them do the analysis, let them empower them to come up with the recommendations, and then back them. That is my one piece of advice. We did it early, so we gained the benefit of doing it. I'd do it even earlier if I knew what I knew now, right?
Yeah, perfect build on that would be, it's never too early. So even at the point of demos and, when you're talking to vendors, like, let those agents come in the call, because they'll ask that question that, somebody else didn't know. And so I think bring them in. The other thing would be to get a very good baseline. Kath mentioned this earlier. Get a baseline early on of state of play. How are things today? Look at some of your metrics, your measures that you're taking, and write them down. Take a baseline, because at some point you're going to have to explain the difference. And whilst it's great to feel the difference, these stats that Dan was able to just throw at us, which were amazing, by the way, less than 0.1% complaints, that's possible because of the baseline. If you take the stat and you know what it is, and then you implement the change, you are then able to go back and measure and demonstrate a difference, not just through feeling, but through the numbers, especially in a world that might be dominated by ROI at the moment. And so I think, I would say to CX leaders, ROI has to take place. It has to happen. We are in business. So make sure you have that skill set, make sure you're taking your baseline and coming back on those numbers. But that doesn't mean that you then have to change who you are. You can still champion the customer experience, find those great nuggets, those great stories, and tell those stories. So I think, if anybody took one thing away from me today, would be use the data that you've been collecting. That would be, the single tip I'll give you. And I'm sure there's so many great ones in here today, but that's kind of what I would do differently, is I would use that data.
And I'm really hoping I'm working here, because sound is not my friend today. But one of the big things is, obviously, it's a big investment up front. And I think we were speaking about this ahead of schedule. What's the risk in terms of not utilizing that data and not getting, I guess, the investment for the next gen? So you start on your first 2 to 3 years, and then actually the business loses interest because you've not demonstrated the ROI. So how can you protect that up front?
I think that used to be something like over 64% of customer experience transformations failed because of lack of buy-in to the business case. And I think this is because when the RFP was launched, there was the launch pad in terms of the current state just wasn't really understood in its earnest. Aside from the tech stack, it's, as I say, it's the cost to serve, etc. So because you can't really measure the improvements over time if you don't know where you're starting from. And we also know that customer experience is a journey with no end destination, which is a bit of a cliche now, but it's absolutely true, and you can chop it down into little chunks, minimal viable product, 1, 2, 3. Start with some really beautiful low-hanging fruit, whether it's email, whether it's language. The beauty of GenAI is actually it can deliver results really, really quickly, rapidly, and then at scale.
Perfect. And I suppose it's the utilization of knowing, hey, where the land lies from all of the big things, and therefore the problem that you're looking to address. If anyone's got any questions, please feel free to ask as we're running through this, because there's a chance to ask any questions of our 3 brilliant speakers here. But I guess, is there anything, Dan or Sham, looking back at your time at Selfridges, that bringing in your team even earlier, that's great. Is there anything else that you would have done differently, or did everything typically run smoothly?
So you go. I think one of the things I guess I didn't know until I knew was navigating, the technical landscape. So I spoke to you about technical debt. Selfridge is a business over 100 years old. There will have been some tech in there that would, still have a number of years on me. And so figuring out how to bring the right teams on side, so, the IT estate, others who have bought in tech and are seeing, the contact center wanting to bring in its own technology as perhaps a challenge to that, or perhaps another thing for them to manage. So a really good comms plan that deals with these different stakeholders who don't typically come to front of mind. Kath earlier mentioned InfoSec. So having them on board early, giving them that reassurance about, SOC 2 compliance, GDPR, all the ISO numbers, all these kind of things. So having great comms early on with all these other stakeholders in an organization the size of what I was at, I think would have made it much smoother, much faster for me. Because even when I thought I was right there at contract signing stage, there was just yet one more thing to do. And the beauty of the first one being the hardest is if you document that journey, document those steps, that then becomes a template for the next time round. And I would say, embrace it. Once you've done the first one, go hell for leather, right? The world's changing around us in front of our eyes. And so, experiment, try, fail fast, try not to fail if you can help it, but fail fast just gets you to the winning solution fast. So I think there's a bit around document your journey, comms, find your stakeholders, and then just give everybody the right kind of assurance depending on who they are.
Perfect. And before we wrap up as the final thing of what would be your individual, and I will not give you one, two top recommendations from you guys as for somebody starting out on this journey. But we've had a question from Abby, and whilst we have some professionals in here that have done the AI implementation and lead, it's basically a question of where would you start in learning and understanding AI for a operational lead role in digital and AI operational lead? Any recommendations from any of you guys of where you've sort of started understanding and learning about AI, or where to go?
So this is a really interesting question, right? And it does leverage on what Sham's just said, because establishing those relationships, again, depending on what it is you're trying to achieve as an organization, right? Establishing those relationships with tech and product and other key stakeholders is absolutely key. Because if you have an idea, right, head of digital and AI, and you put that up on the board, and then another part of the organization is already thinking, well, that role sits in my area, doesn't it? Or part of that role sits in my area, then you're off to a bad start, right? You've not really got off the blocks as quickly, as effectively as you can. So sitting down and again, coming back to the crux of what it is you're trying to do and how you're going to work in partnership to do it, avoids you from building job descriptions or jobs that are parallel. It doesn't mean you can't do that have roles that sit across departments, right? But you have to get the advocacy of that being the case. And what is that role specifically responsible for? And once you've got that kind of detailed understanding and collaboration, then you can move forward. So when I built our digital service team, right? There was a transparency. It's not a digital landscape team, right? So I was able to explain exactly why I wanted a digital service team built from people from within service to help the digital transformation happen, but working alongside and in collaboration with tech and product and the way we prioritize today, right, which is through product led. So that would be my advice: is if you've got a role or a thought about a role, where is it sitting? Have you had those stakeholder conversations? Is it really clear and transparent? Does it cross boundaries? All of those conversations. Back to where is the governance sat around what it is you're trying to do, and who's in the room with you.
Definitely. And recommendations for people that are just starting on this journey. What would be your top 1 or 2 recommendations for somebody as they're about to head out, or if they've got a business that are quite resistant to this, but they've got a use case that they want to get over the line? Any big advice for those guys? So Sham, you unmuted immediately, I think, when I asked this question, so you could go first.
No worries. I guess just to help Abby out, there's a lot of free resources out there, but I'd start with the download of a Chat GPT, a Claude, or a Gemini, any one of those free models. Start playing with it. Go on YouTube and say, how do I do this in Chat GPT? Ask the question, play around with a couple of those examples, and you'll start to understand what's there. So free resources, start with the free stuff, and then pick a single use case, a single problem you want to solve: marketing automation, email automation, data, whatever it is, and then look for the vendors that do that and read their case studies. These are free things that you could do by yourself. The cost to you is time, but it will get you started.
Perfect. And your top 1 or 2 recommendations for somebody starting out on this journey?
I thought,
or was that it? Use the free resources.
Yeah, you use the free resources and pick one single use case. Try and solve one problem, and find a supplier that does that and read their case studies. So you know what you don't know, and you sort of start to uncover where to go next.
Perfect. And Dan?
Yeah. I'd just say start small, right? But get started. Yeah, I shared. We started with one email, one frequently asked question, email, right, and gave 2 people in the team access to actually use Einstein, give Einstein permission to reply to that email, that's really small. And then you can look at the data after a week and see that you sent 7 emails. Quality of those emails being like, and you QA'd the backside of it. Take the data back to the AI forum. Look at the 6. Can we do 2 FAQs now? This is the second FAQ that we'd like signed off to. Yes, it's all the business agreed. Right, great, go again. That's how you do this. But get started. Have a go. Explore it.
And Kath, but last but not least,
I completely agree with Sham and Dan. You know, use the free online resources that are out there. Don't be afraid. Get started. There's too much procrastination that goes on, and I don't know whether we've made it really complicated now because there's so many different stakeholders that need to be involved. It's kind of made us stall in order of an elongated transformation. But also go out to some of these free events. 26th of November at the brewery in London is the Engage Customer Summit. I'll be hosting a roundtable. I needed to get that plug in before the end of this session. So thank you very much, Abby. I owe it to you.
Thank you so much for your time. And Dan is obviously going to be at the UK Contact Centre Expo, sharing the Simply Health story on the keynote stage. Are you there on the Thursday or the Friday? Oh, or is it the Wednesday, Thursday? 27th?
I think it's the 27th, yeah.
27th. I thought so. I keep getting dates so confused in my head. There's so many going on at the moment. So you can go and hear all about the full story there. But honestly, any questions that occur to you after this, please feel free to share with me, Kerry at Sudal Search, and I will do my best to answer anything from the back end of the conversation or from the conversation that we've had here, or by reaching out to these 3 brilliant individuals again, albeit their diaries are jammed. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with this forum with myself and my customers. So thank you again, once again, for your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks.